This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and I'm wearing my Sheik shirt today because I have none other than one of his former managers, Supermouth Dave Drason, returning for a second podcast here on the Hannibal TV. How are you doing today, sir?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me back. Hey, I got my Sheik shirt on too. And just I dug out for you and the fans one of the Sheik's robes and headgear that he gave to me back in, I think this would have been 1971. The last time he wore it was when he wrestled Bobo at the LA Coliseum show, where I think the main event there was Blassie and Tolis. So after the show, he gave that to me, and I still have it in my collection.
I could imagine your collection is probably worth quite a bit to other collectors. What are some of the other items that you have?
I could dig it out, but I'll maybe save it for next time. But I have one of his original vests that he wore in the 50s and 60s, and there's just blood all over it. Blood stains, but they're sort of faded right now. So if ever, somebody wanted to buy that and clone the Sheik and bring him back to life and bring back wrestling the way it used to be, the way our fans, me, you, and everybody else listening here, he could bring back the Sheik and recreate wrestling like it used to be. Plus I have, there would be times that, he'd be in the ring and I'd be managing that, he would have his, famous number 2 taped pencil that he would use. And there would be times always in the match where he'd be, gouging the guy, bleeding, and the guy would make a comeback and, Sheik throws the pencil up in the air. It lands in the ring. His opponent grabs it, starts stabbing the Sheik. Fans go nuts. And sometimes the referee would grab it, or I would want to grab it before, a fan would. So I'd always put those in my, pocket. And years later, I'd be going through some of my clothes, and one outfit that I donated to the Wrestling Hall of Fame, before I donated, I went in my pocket and I had a bloody taped number 2 pencil that he used on Bull Curry one time. And, I still have that. I have other headpieces, so much memorabilia on the Sheik. And just in my personal collection, I have every issue of every Wrestling Review, Wrestling World, Ring Wrestling, so many, all the After magazines, the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling, and so many others that came out, plus, programs from all over the world, dating back to the 30s. I have every issue of the Body Press program, prior to what I wrote, when I wrote it, and, most of them that after I left Big Time Wrestling, I still have all of those. So I have an extensive collection, and it's almost time for me to start getting rid of some stuff. So if there's any fans out there that want to reach out and they're looking for magazines, programs, or anything, hit me up. I'm ready to sell.
Well, whenever you're ready to sell that Sheik Billy Graham painting behind you, maybe long down the road, I would definitely be interested in that.
I will that to you. If I'm on my deathbed, that's yours. Nobody else can have it. I'll will it to you, free.
Oh, wow. What an honor that would be. And as far as the Sheik, we didn't get a chance to put this up last time because you told me about it after, but I'll play it now, this song that you guys created for the Sheik. Could you tell us a little bit about it before I play it for the fans?
Yeah, when there was a Sheik documentary that a guy was doing, and, we didn't really have a song to really, go along with the documentary. And I'm an advocate for a band, a local Detroit band called Horse Cave Trio, probably the premier rockabilly band in the city. And my good friends Ron DeVore, Lou Simon, and Tony Bison, they went into the studio one day, and when they were recording one of their newer CDs, and they took time out and they created the song I Am The Chic. And after they were done in the studio, they stopped by my house and asked, hey, put this in your CD player, tell us what you think. I put it in there and I darn near cried, because it really captured the essence of the Sheik. It was just not rockabilly, it was hardcore. And it was so different than any other, kind of song that could have, been made by him or by any other band. And behind it, I put a lot of my, vintage photographs, and, I made this video, and hopefully people like it and they like the song.
All right, so we'll put it up here now. Yeah, that's great. That gives me goosebumps to see, actually.
I appreciate that. I hope it does. I'm almost in tears watching it. Some of those great matches, and the times I'm photographing. I can just put myself back to when I shot them, and like the robe behind me. It was the second picture in there. Boy. Abdullah Farouk, Eddie Creechman, Sheik. What great memories.
And something else I noticed from that video is the outfits that you would wear when you were managing him. How much effort and thought did you put into putting those together?
A lot. Only because back in the 70s, that's when I started wearing those kind of things. Uh, I wanted to portray like a rock and roll kind of, persona, which hadn't been done before. And also, I was one of the youngest managers ever. Most managers over the history of professional wrestling were either retired wrestlers or somebody that was in the office, older person who could talk on television, for a guy that they were trying to promote, but the guy couldn't talk for himself. He couldn't put himself over. So they'd always put these other managers with him. And that's what I always wanted to be. And, I was, 19, just short of 19 years old when I first debuted managing Ben Justice. And I used entrance music, which at that time, there was only a couple other people I can think of in the 70s who ever did that. So Vince McMahon, says that he created all this music, entrance music. Well, that's a bunch of BS because he didn't. I did it way before his Attitude Era thing.
It's too bad that song didn't exist when the Sheik was still alive to come out to, because it definitely gives the aura that he had well.
Oh, that would have been great. That would have sold 1 million copies. But then again, the Sheik's promotion with the Sheik's backing and stuff, Bob Finnegan, who was one of the announcers and stuff, he came up. He was a musician and a singer. He came up with the song "The Ballad of Bobo Brazil," and it sold a lot of copies. But boy, if you can go on YouTube now and type in "The Ballad of Bobo Brazil" by Bob Finnegan, oh boy, it's a stinker.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Now, as far as wrestlers, there's a lot of wrestlers that love the Sheik and also hated the Sheik. There's definitely two camps. Could you go into that a little bit from your experience?
Well, during, the time of big time wrestling, you'd hear grumblings, back and forth, in the dressing room, or if you're on the road with a guy about payoffs or, I'm not getting the push. And those kind of guys, had little animosity toward the Sheik. They had a working relationship, but friendship, by no means no. But when he passed away, I'll never forget this. I was at one of the CACs, and Jack Briscoe was sitting next to me, and he started to, chat up with me. And I happened to mention that it wasn't, but 6 months before, I was the only wrestler or wrestling person who ever, was at the Sheik's funeral. And Jack Briscoe looked at me in the eye and said, "It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy." And it's like I was taken aback. So to this day, Jack Briscoe, and Jack Briscoe fans, excuse me, but Jack Briscoe kissed my ass. Johnny Powers, same thing. I've been friends with Johnny Powers since I was a young kid. And, we were at a Titans in Toronto reunion. And, he mentioned me about Sheik and stuff. And it's like, they were both promoters in their own city. The Johnny Powers used, Sheik in Cleveland. Sheik gave Johnny Powers, a real good push, back in the early 60s, 65, 66, when he bought the territory. But Johnny Powers, still had animosity toward the Sheik. There's other guys who are still alive, and I won't mention their name, only out of respect. And, they've, made it known that they hated the Sheik. But then again, there's other guys, who praise him, thank him for, Sheik took care of, so many of the young talent. And, when guys were down on their luck, and I'll mention guys like Bearcat Wright, Dr. Jerry Graham, so many others, that when they were down on their luck and they couldn't get into another promotion, Sheik brought them into big time wrestling. and he gave him, a good push. Mainly mid carders and stuff, but every so often, that he would, put him on top. He'd go against them, and he took care of a lot of guys. And myself, I can't thank him enough, for what he did, for my career. Terry Sullivan, another, he started out as a fan, good friend of mine. She gave him an opportunity, and he went with it, and became one of the greatest TV announcers of all time. Doesn't get the credit he deserves, but trust me when I say Terry Sullivan is A1 class person and one of the greatest TV commentators ever.
What did you think about the Sheik getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame? Obviously, very deserving. Were you there for that ceremony?
No, I wanted to go because Bobby Heenan was there, and Bobby, called me up beforehand and asked me, if I wanted to come and, come on down, you're, probably the biggest Sheik fan he knows. And, he was a big fan of the Sheik also. I'll say this before we, continue. When Bobby Heenan was working for Dick the Bruiser, before he became a manager, he was selling programs and Cokes and popcorn and taking the ring jackets back. And he became friends with the Sheik because the Sheik would always give him $5, to, take care of his car and, take a look after it, warm it up after the show was over and stuff. So Bobby Heenan was always a big Sheik fan. Now I forgot what the heck we were talking about.
The Sheik going into the Hall of Fame, but I've seen the video of Bobby Heenan putting over what a fan he was of the Sheik. So you're 100% right.
Because it was at our Fox Theater in downtown Detroit here. I would have loved to have gone. His wife, Joyce Farhat, she appeared. Eddie Farhat Jr. appeared. I don't know if Tom Farhat showed up or not, but I think it was Dusty Rhodes who inducted him. I would have loved to have been there, but truthfully, I wasn't invited.
I see. Any stories about Bobby Heenan? How did you know him? Just from interacting with him over the years?
I first met Bobby in 1967, I think it was. I would always go to St. Louis as a kid and visit, my good friends there, Don Wilson, who worked for Sam Muchnick at the time. And we'd always go to the, that Keel would be on, Keel Auditorium shows would be on Friday night. They'd have a spot show somewhere else on Saturday. And on Sundays, they always had a TV tapings at the Chase, KPLR, I think it was. And just through Don, he would introduce me to all the guys, Baron von Raschke and Blackjack Lanza, Bobby Heenan. And, Bobby, we got to talking and, I'm from Detroit. And, he'd see me like, just say in July. And then in August, I was there again, in September, October. And he's like, I thought you live in Detroit. I says, I do, but I come here to see my friends and, photograph wrestling. And then, through Don and Sam Muchnick, I was one of the fortunate ones to be able to shoot up at ringside in St. Louis, which was like unheard of for years at the time. And, Bobby was always there, always on the show. So he'd see me there. And then when, Bruisers, Dick the Bruiser went against the Sheiks promotion in Detroit starting in 1971, Bobby Heenan was always here. And we'd always meet up at the Sheraton Cadillac Hotel after our shows. So it's like I'd been, a really good, a friend of his and, loved the guy dearly. And I'll never forget this about him also. When I debuted as a manager, October 9th, 1974, Bobby called me up the night before to wish me luck. And I never forgot that.
Yeah, he was one of the greats, and it's cool that he had that type of relationship with you. The first time I saw you actually and learned about you was it popped up in my feed from your Big Time Memories podcast. a tour that you had of the Sheiks Mansion that I believe his daughter was part of this tour, but I'd highly suggest people to go and check out the video. But could you tell us a little bit about this mansion and how long you lived there for?
Yeah, he started construction on it, and I believe in 1974. Moved in about 1975 or 76. There was some cost overruns and other things, but I've been to the old house, which was in Williamston, Michigan, on Grand River. But up till that time, I never visited the mansion because I was gone from the territory. But on our Big Time Memory show, we reached out to the owners now, it's called the Wheatfield Inn, and it's a bed and breakfast place. And we reached out to them and asked if we can come and film there and, tour the house and stuff. And, they were gracious enough to let us do that. So if you go on our Big Time Memories on Rocks TV, you can look up one of the episodes, and I think it's called The House the Sheik Built. And you can, tour the Sheik's house, all the levels. I think it was 4 or 5 levels, and all the rooms that we went into, and just it was amazing. What a trip to go through there.
And I guess in the yard of that house is where Sabu and RVD would have been trained.
I think that would have been at the old house in the basement. The Sheik had a mat down there, and I would almost be sure that it was at the old house because that's when they were first breaking in. It could have been at the new house, but I never knew of a wrestling ring or mat that he had there.
I noticed in that video there was a huge wine cellar. Was that for the bed and breakfast, or was he also a wine connoisseur?
Well, he definitely wasn't a wine connoisseur, but judging by the bottles that were in there. But yeah, he did have a wine cellar there. That was original to the house. I'm sure that he enjoyed wine. When we would go to dinner at the Grecian Gardens in Greektown in downtown Detroit after a show, he was partaking into wine. I wasn't drinking back then. I wish I was, because like him, and I said Andre the Giant before, drinking wine with them would have been fabulous. But there was some nice bottles of champagne, some nice bottles of wine, and then I'd see some like Thunderbird or Ripple, and it's like, oh my God, Lou Klein was at the Sheik's house.
Rick Brooks says, how many times did you guys come to Cincinnati? I attended matches at the Music Hall and at the Gardens.
As a photographer, I was down in Cincinnati all the time. I mean, going back to like 1969, 1970, because I was really good friends with the promoter, Les Ruffin. And he was the one who gave me basically my first start in the big time wrestling territory to be able to shoot up ringside, right up at the ring. And I was at Cincinnati Gardens a lot of times over the years. But managing the Sheik, no, I never managed him in Cincinnati, though. I wish I would have. The Garden was a magical place.
What was the roughest arena you guys would go to? Because I recently heard that Toledo, Ohio is like surprisingly one of the most dangerous cities in America. So would that have been one of them?
No, Toledo wasn't bad at all. They had some ropes, thin little ropes around the ring, with some pylons and stuff to keep the fans back. So that was never a problem. It was like the smaller high schools and stuff like that, because the high schools didn't know much about wrestling. They set it up. Our guys would set up the ring, and everybody else from the crew, from the high schools would set up the seats and stuff, and they'd set them up like 3-4 feet, from the ring. And it's like, good for them to be able to see so close. But for a manager like me with, somebody 2-3 feet behind me, and not knowing when I get involved or something like that, what the heck these people are going to do. So it was not so much the bigger arenas. We had our security, and even some of the small shows, like I mentioned on the last show, our good friends Kenny and Dennis Wagner, God bless them, they protected us like we were the president. They were our mafia, boy, and they really took care of us and saved our lives a lot of times.
I can imagine. Another fan wants to know, is it true that the Sheik kayfabed everyone, and even at his house when the wrestlers would come over, the baby faces would eat in one room and the heels would eat in another?
I think that might be more, fiction that somebody else said. I mean, if you're, eating and dining with the Sheik at his house, like Bobo or Johnny Valentine or, whoever, why would he kayfabe them at his own home? There's no fans there to see anything. Nobody's taking pictures or video. I think that's a rumor that somebody started, and, it just gained that internet, kind of thing.
How important was kayfabe to him? Could you give us some examples of being out with them, and how what lengths he'd go to maintain it?
Oh my Lord. He was like the greatest kayfaber, I think, that ever, stepped on the face of the planet. He kept his gimmick, rock solid, from going way back in the 40s when he started all the way through the 80s and 90s. The people in Japan, when he would appear in Japan, they were scared of any arena or that he ever performed in. People were just frightened of this guy. We'd sometimes, when we'd go out to dinner or something, we'd be in private rooms or something. But even like on a road trip going down to a show, we stopped for a sandwich or something. It's like we'd talk amongst ourselves, and he wouldn't, speak at all. He'd be looking around at other, fans who may have noticed him or something. But there was one incident, I think it was at Cobo Arena, where there was a guy, some young kid, college kid or something, really cocky. And he found out that the Sheik's name was Ed Farhat. So he told a security guard, yeah, I want to talk to this Ed Farhat guy. So it's like, one of the security guards went in the dressing room and said, hey, there's a guy out here. He's, spouting off your name, And it's like she came out of the dressing room, grabbed this guy by the throat, threw him up against a brick wall, and says, yeah, my name is Ed Farhat. And if you ever mention that name again, I'll cut you. I'll kill you. And, the guy, we never saw the guy again.
Wow, that's incredible. Would he punish wrestlers? Like we heard Bill Watts would fine wrestlers if they were outside, babyface and heels being seen together. When he was promoting, would he implement those type of discipline tactics on his wrestlers?
No, not that I ever saw. There'd be times that, most of the time the heels rode with heels, baby faces rode with baby faces. But there'd be times that, you had, just say myself and Killer Brooks, we'd be in the car with Tony Marino. And it's like, we'd ride, and, we were careful about it. And we'd drop Tony off a couple blocks before the arena, and we'd go, and same thing. After the show was over, we'd meet at a designated place, pick him up, and we'd, drive home. But, Sheik, he, back in then, you policed yourself. You had to be smart. And, most of the boys, that worked for the Sheik were old, I shouldn't say old timers, but they were good veterans, and they knew, they kept kayfabe. And it's like, and those same guys taught the young guys, what to do. You kayfabe, you keep your, ears open and your mouth shut. You don't tell your girlfriend or your wife, that this is all, predetermined, let's say. and those are the guys, I mean, they taught me, and I saw them, say the same thing to other guys. Don't bring your girlfriend here. It just doesn't make sense. It looks bad. You're trying to put yourself over with her or what? You're going to lose anyway. So, why do you have her there? So, yeah, I mean, Sheik really didn't, lay down any laws about that at all, but it was like self-policed more than anything.
Someone would like to know if you have any memories of working in London, Ontario with the Sheik or the Canadian Wildman.
No, I did manage in London, Ontario, when Frankie Lane was promoting there. I managed, let's see, Blackjack Luca there, maybe Ben Justice, Killer Brooks, a couple other guys that I'm, not remembering right now. But I didn't work for the Wildman at all. I was, working for, George Cannon's Superstars of Wrestling. And after, I left, the Canada scene, I was working, Michigan, Ohio, and, some other towns there. But I never got to work, with the Sheik because he was doing that in the 70s through the early 80s. And I didn't start managing him until 1984. And he was already done, doing the Canada stuff for the Wildman. So, no, I never worked with Sheik in London. Sorry.
I hear that there's going to be an upcoming Dark Side of the Ring about Adrian Adonis. I think when he was passed, was it the Wild Man or the Bear Man that he passed away wrestling for? One of the two.
I thought they were one and the same, Wild Man and Bear Man.
Too. Anyway, Sabu was around for that tour, I believe, which is the connection there. But there was a book written about the Sheik by Brian Solomon, who I didn't interview, but he did another interview on this channel about a month or so ago. I have not. Oh, you have the book right there.
There's the book.
Give us. I actually watched the interview. I learned a few things about the interview. I didn't know some of the negative stuff that was brought up in the interview, so I'm curious to know your opinion.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's called Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real-life story of wrestling's greatest original Sheik. And let me say this, to me, it's the great, I may be a little biased, but I think it's the greatest wrestling book ever written. Nobody has researched, like Brian, the life of the Sheik, where he had, couldn't speak with the Sheik. He got no help from any of the family at all. He did all this research on his own, and interviewing a bunch of people like myself and so many others that he did. The book is just a phenomenal read. If any wrestling fan watching today, doesn't have a copy of this book, what are you waiting for? This is the greatest wrestling book you'll ever read, the greatest research on the greatest heel that ever lived.
As far as you reading that book, which obviously I'm going to have to order myself, I only found out about it when he appeared on the podcast. But was there anything you learned in it that you didn't know, being probably the most knowledgeable person of the Sheik's career?
Well, Brian interviewed me multiple times. And when he got he would get chapters done, he would send me, the chapters for me to read over. And I would edit some stuff for him, make a few corrections. So I got to proofread all the chapters before the book even came out. What can I say? It's like a spectacular book. Brian did, a phenomenal job. And, yes, I did learn a lot of stuff. He researched his family tree going back, his parents and stuff, where they lived in Lansing, Michigan, and so many other things, his Army record, and stuff after I was done managing the Sheik and I sort of got out of the business for a while. Other things, where he went in Japan, and some of his demons that came to light during his late years when, he was getting older. And I just remember there would be a few times that the poor guy just, had a hard time getting in the ring. His body had just deteriorated, and, he couldn't, get up the ring steps and, crawl through the second rope like we always do. He would have to roll himself in the ring. And, just the toll that, it took on his body. I never saw him use any, drugs or anything like that. I had no idea, but I guess, he used some stuff to, dull the pain. And that, that's one of the few things that came out in the book that I didn't know about.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed from the interview with the author on this channel was he was finding it kind of sad about his later years in Japan, but he made a lot of money in those years, and those matches were still memorable despite his handicaps, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I have firsthand knowledge that, he was paid, most of the time when he was going to Japan, he was paid $10,000 per match, and in cash, before he would go on. In his later years when he was working for FMW, I think the promotion was, that, it got, the famous fire, barbed wire match. And a good friend of mine, Billy Anderson, who, was with the Sheik at the time, he'd always tell me stories and, send me photographs. And, God bless Bill Anderson for taking care of, the Sheik, many times while he was in Japan.
Yes, I've interviewed Bill numerous times, and he's another big fan of the Sheik. Could you talk about the Sheik's friendship with Larry Sheen?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, that's how I, got into wrestling. Really, I think I mentioned it on our, your previous broadcast, that Leaping Larry Shane lived upstairs from me in our 2-story home on the east side of Detroit. And, the thing that, really perplexes me to this day is, being with the Sheik and working with them and, sitting down and talking and all through all those years, Larry Shane's name never got mentioned. I had no idea that they were such good friends. And, even though they went against each other numerous times, in Detroit and down in Texas, when Sheik and Larry Shane were down in Texas, working for, Dory Funk Sr., they lived together. Their families lived together. And then, they were such good friends, and they came back up here when, Sheik bought the promotion in 1964. I mean, that was going to be probably the biggest feud, Detroit have ever seen, besides Sheik and Dick the Bruiser. And unfortunately, before, they can, work a program together, Larry got killed in an accident, in Illinois, driving back home from some shots that he was doing. So the Sheik and Larry Shane just never happened. But when Larry Shane passed away, it was the Sheik who paid for his funeral. And, that was never revealed until many, many years later. And it could be, one of the first times, a lot of your fans are hearing that.
Yeah, that's interesting, showing the generous side of him. Somebody, I haven't heard this story, but did the Sheik really walk in on Tommy Rich and Jim Barnett? I think you might be thinking of the Iron Sheik. I don't know.
That I wouldn't know. It's possible, if it was, it would probably be down in Atlanta or something like that when, Sheik was trying to help out Ann Gunkel down there. But, Sheik and, Sheik bought the Detroit territory from Jim Barnett. So they had some relationship. I don't know if it was good or bad. But, that could have been possible. And Tommy Rich, I have, that incident, I have no idea.
Yeah, as far as the book, I believe there was a period of time in the 80s where nobody would book this Sheik. That's one of the things the author talked about. What was that heat all about? Was it all having to do with payoffs and maybe competition? Because I know that people that worked for Ann Gunkel, for instance, got some heat with other promoters due to that territory war in Atlanta. But what were some of the reasons behind that?
Well, it was in, the 1980s, was when, Vince McMahon tried to, expand. He was buying up talent. He was, trying to put almost every territory out of business by, like for years, it was just an unwritten rule that, territories would have their TV show and it was put on, for free. And the station made their money by commercials. And the promotions got to plug their shows multiple times during the show, so that was free advertising for them. And then when McMahon came in and started paying TV stations to have his show, well, it pushed the other local territory shows to like 12 o'clock or 1, 2 in the morning, when who's going to watch it then? But wrestling was changing then. The NWA was in disarray. All the promoters, they couldn't agree on anything. Sam Muchnick for many, many years was the backbone of the NWA. But when you had Bob Geigel and then Fritz von Erich, take over, and, they were just looking out for themselves, I think, instead of, looking out for the whole, NWA territories that were around the country. And then the NWA was getting sued multiple times. And some of the guys, heels and baby faces, were brought into court over lawsuits, filed by, I know one was by a guy, Jim Wilson, football player and, so-called wrestling jabroni, that tried to, make himself out as a champion, which he wasn't. But yeah, the NWA was, in dire straits in the 80s, and, they started seeing the writing on the wall, and one by one, guys were selling off their interest in, certain territories, and, territories were getting bought up for, pennies on the dollar. And, that's the way it was in the 80s.
And of course, the Sheik ended up working for the NWA, I believe, during the Great American Bash. He was paid a lot of money. I think it was Kevin Sullivan's idea to bring him in Detroit. Were you good friends with him at that time? And did he ever tell you about his insights into coming in for that?
That was just after I stopped managing him. Wrestling in Detroit was, crumbling. Especially us, doing, mainly spot shows, at local, gymnasiums or, just smaller venues, because if, the WWF TV was on at the time everywhere. So if, people, wrestling fans, didn't notice one of the guys, from back, that they saw on TV, because we didn't have TV then. And that's why, things started to dwindle. If, you had, one of the WWF guys, yeah, you were, drawing big crowds, but, like the Sheiks, the Bobo Brazils, the Killer Tim Brooks, and the Fabulous Kangaroos, and, guys of old, they, if you didn't have TV, you had nothing back then.
That's true, and I understand that he actually held out for a lot of money to appear on that show.
Yeah, I think he worked the one show. I can't remember who it was with, but maybe it was Dick Murdoch or something like that, and worked the show, and then I guess they had a disagreement on money for him to come back and appear at the other one, and he no-showed that. So he was going through a rough time, business wise, money wise. He was losing the mansion. His marriage was crumbling. The Sheik, he was getting older and he wasn't, that main attraction around the world like he used to be. So it's like, just like an old time baseball player, who, hits the 40, 50 home runs and bats 350. And now he's at the twilight of his career and he's batting 210 and he's living on his name. And, that's, what the fans, they still get to see this guy, this Hall of Famer. But, when his career and he can't do what he used to do, it's just the beginning of the end.
Were you disappointed that his run in WCW managing Sabu never worked out? Because, of course, they appeared on the Halloween Havoc in Detroit, and then I believe on a Nitro after. But for some reason, the contract never actually happened. But it looked like it could have had potential.
Yeah, it could have had big potential. It could have, jump started, Sabu, he was, great in what was it? Not WCW, ECW. Yeah, he was great there. I love watching him there. But, having Sheik as his manager, that would have been, kind of tough. And, for me, sad to see in a way. Because, like I said, it was hard for him to move around and maneuver and, what's he going to do? Throw the fire or something like that, which people had seen 100,000 times by that point. And then you had guys like Jerry Lawler and, Memphis territory throwing the fire. And, the Eddie Gilbert, I think, was throwing fire, and it's like, the mystique of, the Sheik being able to, produce fire out of his hands. Well, the fans now they know, well, how did Jerry Lawler and Eddie Gilbert get this talent? It's not something that's passed down, through heredity, so it's a sad situation. But yeah, it would have been, pretty cool to see, anything Sheik, Sabu, it would have been great.
And in one of the worst matches ever, we saw Hulk Hogan try to do it with the Ultimate Warrior in WCW. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No. Oh, God, Hulk Hogan.
They actually tried to light the paper. They got it on camera. And
really?
There was a problem with the lighter.
Oh, yeah, well, figures. Hulk Hogan. Oh God! Don't mention that guy. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did you ever see the Sheik live?
No, I didn't. Sadly, I wish I could have said that.
Well, and I know you're such a big fan of his and stuff that that's what I wondered if you ever saw him live. But let me ask you this: how would you feel if you ever went against the Sheik? How do you think that would have went?
I would have loved it. Well, since I wrestled Abdullah probably 15 times, they had similar styles. I think that the Sheik and I could have had very good matches.
I could see that. You'd have a crimson mask, no doubt about that.
Yeah, no, I'm a massive fan of his, but by the time I've found out about him, he had I guess he would have been wrestling in FMW and not really wrestling in North America as much, because I just turned 40 recently, so he was a little bit before my time as far as his North American fame. Somebody's wondering if you have any road stories you could share about the Sheik.
We covered a number of them, when we talked last. But it's like, not really major road stories, when we, get in the limo and, Williamston and drive to a show. It's just like, no big deal, just sit and talk. And, that's about it. Nothing on the road that was extraordinary. The Louis Martinez story that I told the last time, that, was pretty epic, but that wasn't on the road. That was, more in ring. So really nothing out of the ordinary, on the road. But let me go back to you, you against the Sheik, that would have been pretty cool. But if you had a chance to tag team, would you want to partner with the Sheik, and against who? Or if you were going against the Sheik, who would you like to have as your partner, and who would you like to see as the Sheik partner in one of your dream matches?
Well, if I were to have the Sheik as the partner, it would be against the Funks, 100%. That would be an amazing match to have. And if I was going against the Sheik, oh, that would be tough. I guess Bobo, because Bobo knows the Sheik the best. And I'd like to take on, if he was my partner, the Sheik and Abdullah. I think that'd be a good match.
Oh, that'd be classic. Yeah, that'd be a sellout somewhere around the world, no doubt about it.
Was Bobo his most financially successful feud, or which feud would you say was his most financially successful in that territory? Obviously, he made a fortune in Japan.
Yeah, probably Bobo, no doubt about it. Their Kobo Arena matches were either sellout or near sellout. But there was times that didn't matter who the Sheik went against. They were sellouts. So he was financially pretty good off on a sellout with anybody. But I say this for Detroit territory. They really blossomed, in the fall and winter months and early spring. But once spring hit, you had, Tiger baseball and, things like that, and people wanting to get outside and being out in the sunshine and, do other things, go to movies and stuff. So in late spring and summer, Kobo Arena really wasn't a big draw. They still drew, half decent crowds. They never lost money, but when winter and fall came, you could bet 9,000-10,000 or sellout. 12,500 would be the sellout at Kobo Arena.
What advice would you have to heel wrestlers watching this interview after managing the greatest heel wrestler of all time?
Go to YouTube and watch some of the old matches, how psychology, would work in a match. You don't have to fly and, fly around and, get these high spots and stuff like that. You watch a Johnny Valentine match where the first 15 minutes of a Johnny Valentine match, he'd have an arm bar on you. And, he just worked that arm bar, over the top of you. And the fans, that's how you get the fans in. You're trying to give your babyface guy, root him on. You got to give him, the incentive to, break that hold. And, these guys back then, they drew the fans into the match with their psychology. They were telling a story in the ring, where nowadays I don't see any storytelling. I see, a bump after bump after bump, and fighting out on the floor, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what they're trying to portray. So if you're a young guy, research, learn the history of wrestling, what made wrestling so great over the years, and watch these, some tapes that are on YouTube that you can see the psychology, how these guys work and why they became famous. And just like the Sheik, he didn't have to take bumps. He rarely took bumps. And look how great he was. His in-ring psychology, just coming out of the dressing room door, this guy, instilled fear, and the crowd would just build, the boos, and, their emotions would just emote like no other performer in the history of wrestling, just by him walking to the ring, and his prayer rug kind of, ritual. And then once the pencil came out, and when his opponent got that pencil, and the blood, and all the wild antics that he did, study that and study other guys, like I said, Johnny Valentine, Bobo Brazil, Pompero Firpo, another, top heel of, old. All those old guys, they've got something to teach you. Don't just go by what you learn in these wrestling schools. They're teaching you the basics. And what you're trying to do is, take those basics and expound on them, and expounding them on from what you watch on TV. Well, you're going in the wrong direction. There's going to be maybe 10 guys out of 10,000 wrestlers over the next 10 years who are going to be the major stars on TV. And that's because the promoters, or whoever they are, that's who is going to put them over. It's not because of their, there's so many guys that I see with so much great talent out there. John Morrison, Cesaro, oh God, there's this other guy, Dolph Ziggler. Those guys got so much potential to be the top baby faces or heels in professional wrestling, but they're not getting the push. Who are they pushing? Guys who can fly around, or, bleed the most, or, it's perplexing to me.
At least from what I understand, those three have had big contracts over the years, so at least they're financially set. But I definitely agree with you on John Morrison. He never reached his full potential, even though he's had a great career so far. But what do you think of the lack of kayfabe now? I understand that everybody knows it's a work and stuff, but recently I watched the press conference WWE had after the Elimination Chamber, where they have Sami Zayn saying right after the show on the WWE's YouTube channel, "We all know what this is." It's like, do we really want to have it rubbed in our faces that much that it's a work, or do you think at this point it doesn't even matter?
Well, kayfabe was great up until WWF TV took over and they brought the cameras backstage. When the mystique was gone and fans had no idea that, the baby faces and heels were in the same room, when they drew back the curtain, on kayfabe, it killed, I can't say it killed wrestling, but it killed kayfabe, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's interesting now. There's more revenue being made than ever, but if you're walking around town or talking to people, people don't really watch it, even though they can still sell out major arenas for like WrestleMania. But I think that has a lot to do with people traveling to the shows, but you don't see the t-shirts around as much. However,
No.
there's no question it's successful still.
Well, if you, follow things on the internet, the big pay-per-views, you'll get, good crowd or a sellout, but you look at some of their, other, regional house shows, there's like so many empty seats, and they're covering it up with tarp and stuff, or moving everybody in the arena onto one side, for the cameras to see, that make it look like it's full. So yeah, it's not all it's cracked up to be. They're not doing good on a lot of the regular house shows, but they're doing good on their pay-per-views and, bigger things that they promote.
Yeah, and for instance, for Toronto, they used to come monthly to the major NHL arena. Now they come 2 or 3 times a year to the minor hockey arena. So it's not the same, and they don't do the smaller towns anymore as much as they used to.
Yeah,
But
it's like, you don't have a, city that gets, great, big time wrestling like we had every 2 weeks. Or during the promotional war, we had wrestling every week, and Toledo, Ohio ran every week, and people would always come. It was a magical time in big time wrestling, and, just like any other sport, people talk about the old days. They like that, I was just, relaying a story to a friend of ours. My father-in-law had season tickets for the Detroit Red Wings hockey games, back at the Olympia Stadium before there was glass. There was fencing all around the, rink. And, people don't realize, that they think the glass has been there since, the beginning of the NHL, but no, they used to have, like chicken wire or, just regular, hurricane fencing around the rink.
Yeah, I do recall that. It's still like that at some park rinks around here. I don't know really where this question's coming from. Maybe something I don't know about, but Rick Brooks wants to know what the Sheik's opinion of the Hells Angels was. Was there some connection there?
Oh, he loved them. Not the motorcycle gang by no means, but Chris and
the tag team, of course, Chris Cole.
Yeah, Chris Colt and Ronnie and Paul Dupree, as they were known back then. Man, they were heat magnets when they came into the territory. It's like wrestling fans had seen nothing like that before, and they weren't big, road warrior type of wrestlers. They were medium size, but boy, could they work. They could draw heat. They can entertain. And I say to this day, the Hells Angels are my favorite #1 tag team that ever, existed.
Well, I understand. Speaking of Dark Side of the Ring, which I think you're going to appear on an episode of, Chris Colt is going to have a Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Yeah,
but
should be very interesting. I hope I can put him in a good light because Chris had his demons. A lot of the kayfabe fans, they bring up him being liking other persuasion, his drug use, his way of life. But Chris was one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. Good guy to be around. And every time he was in the ring, I made sure I was, up at the ringside with my camera so I can, not only capture pictures, but watch him work close up. I've always said, on our Big Time Memory show, me and Terry, exchanged, what was the, best, match you have ever seen. And I think Terry's was Johnny Valentine against the Sheik, and mine would have been Chris Colt versus Frankie Lane. People, Frankie Lane and Chris Colt, who cares? Okay, they weren't big stars and stuff, but if you could seen their matches, boy, if they were, still videotaped, they were just classic matches that they worked back and forth. They took their bumps here and there. They drew the fans in to their matches. They told a story in the ring like nobody, I've ever seen before. So yeah, Chris Colt, what a great talent he was.
And speaking of Bill Anderson, who you mentioned earlier, he was tag team partners with Chris Colt for a while. Last question here before we sign off for this time. Is it true that the Sheik had a hand in training Muhammad Ali for wrestling a little bit?
Yeah. Muhammad Ali lived on the west side of Michigan. And when he was, starting with the Antonio Inoki bout, he had to, learn some wrestling holds, what to expect. He didn't know what to expect. And, to this day, I don't know if the Inoki Ali thing was, a work. Was it a shoot? To this day, I don't know. You would think it was a shoot because Inoki stayed on his back the whole time, and how's Ali, gonna, knock this guy out when he's on his back? But the Sheik, yeah, he had a hand in, training him and stuff. There's a few photographs out there of, Sheik and Ali, back in Williamston, Michigan. He was, training him a little bit. But also you had, guys like Freddie Blassie and Gorilla Monsoon, who also, tended to Ali at the time.
Yeah, I heard it was supposed to be a work, but it turned into a shoot somehow. One quick thing I'll slip in here because this guy asked it a bunch of times. Did you know Thunderbolt Patterson?
Yeah, great T-Bolt. What a guy he was. Man, when he came into territory, I think 67 or 68, man, he'd get on TV, have his bout, go over an enhancement talent. And then when he got outside that ring with Lord Layton to do an interview, man, he was shucking and jiving and talking stuff that, the people of Detroit really never heard before, unless you were of, a black persuasion. They understood him, the jive that he was laying down. Oh, T-Bolt, what a great guy, great talent, man, fan favorite, a heel, bad heel, also when he was here. Yeah, got nothing but praise, for T-Bolt, great guy.
So, where can people follow you on social media? And we mentioned your house tour there of the Sheik's old house on Big Time Memories. I'd encourage people to check out that YouTube channel.
Yeah, go to Rox TV, ROX TV, Big Time Memories. And there's a retrospective out there. It has all the episodes on there, plus clips also from those shows. It's all on YouTube. You could, contact me, Dave Drason, on Facebook. Happy to answer any questions or anything that you have, anything that you want to know about professional wrestling. And before I forget, if I can, we mentioned the Sheik's book, but a good friend of mine, Gary Roll, has a few books out on the Sheik. Go to Amazon. He just, he's got single issues. Plus, he just came out with a Matt Memories, the Sheik Trio, all 3 books put together, plus some extras. So go to Amazon, look up the Sheik by G.J. Roll. His name is Gary Roll, but look up G.J. Roll. They're great books. They're small and they're, really affordable. I think his single books are $7.95 and the trio is like $17.95. So want to give a shout out, because it's very Sheik related.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to say.
The only thing that we really didn't bring up this time is the Sheik snake, Kibby. The Sheik, later in his career started bringing this snake out to the ring. And at first, he brought it first time that at an Olympia show where he was going against the mighty Igor. And Ivan Kalmakov said, he's got this secret thing that, will make mighty Igor the United States champion. He's got this secret thing. And he had this big, long box out at the ring. And at one point, he opened up the box and it was this big snake. And, the Sheik was just terrified, ran out of the ring, got counted out. And then, for many months, they would have this snake and the Sheik was always afraid of this snake. And then out of nowhere, next thing you know, the Sheik's wearing this snake and bringing it to the ring, and it became, a part of him. And it's like, it was his pet snake that he, had at the Williamston office of Big Time Wrestling. So that was one thing I, forgot to bring up before. But other than that, I really appreciate you having me back on the show again. I hope the fans learn more about the Sheik. If they have any more questions, shoot them the, Hannibal here, and he'll get them back to me. And if you want a part 3 of Hannibal and Supermouth, I'll be glad to come back anytime.
Great, that would be awesome. Would the Sheik have had the snake before Jake? Just for the record.
Oh, way before. Yeah, years before.
Very good. Well, thank you again. And I love that Sheik picture in the background. And you're a wealth of knowledge, great historian. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Anytime. And thank you, to all your viewers who, took the time to watch, and hopefully they learned something. And like I said, if they want to know anything about the Sheik, check out our Big Time Memory show or shoot me a message. Always.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the